Who the hell are you?
Just a friend. But you can call me the Riddler.
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, the Infuso. And in 1996, Jim Carrey starred in a movie called Cable Guy. A pretty funny drama comedy that didn't do so well at the box office, at least not by Jim Carrey standards. It wasn't a total flop, but it definitely wasn't the success that the studio had hoped for. A lot of the people at the time claimed that the reason the movie didn't make Jim Carrey money was because the public wasn't ready for Jim Carrey to be a bad guy. So if we're working with that logic, I think it's more than fair to say that the public obviously wasn't ready the year before either when Batman Forever came out, where Jim Carrey wasn't just a bad guy, but a full-fledged villain. This role is often lost on Jim Carrey's extensive resume. And yeah, sure, the guy's played a whole lot more iconic roles on the big screen. I mean, we're talking about the brilliant mind behind The Mask, Ace Ventura, The Grinch, Dr. Robotnik, Lloyd Christmas, Count Olaf, Mr. Popper? You get the point. But I don't think he's ever really gotten the credit he deserves for this particular character. Instead of being met with praise, he was sort of met with a little bit of backlash. A lot of people seem to write this performance off as either Jim Carrey just being Jim Carrey, or alternatively as Jim Carrey mistakenly playing the Joker instead of the Riddler. And I can understand how someone can make that mistake, but I'm telling you, it's just that. A mistake. I find this interpretation of the character to be much more in line with a much more famous version of that character. A version of the Riddler who wasn't too dissimilar to the Joker, and who was also played by a real-life funny man not too dissimilar from Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey comes off as the second coming of Frank Gorshin's Riddler, feeling like a much more modernized take on the 1966 Batman TV show villain. The fact that some of the characters' outfits are modeled after Gorshin's on the show, and that there are some blatant references to that iconic version of the character as Easter eggs throughout, really make me think that this was Joel Schumacher's vision for the villain. Both variants of the character are chaotic and comedic, sharing a very similar sixth sense of humor. They're very slapsticky in all that they do. Despite being destructive degenerates with dangerously high IQs, both question mark men come off as complete goofs. Campy doesn't even begin to describe either of them. And I think if you go into this movie with that version of the character in mind, you'll have a much better idea for what this movie was going for, and to a certain degree, succeeded in. Now look, I'm not going to say that this was the perfect portrayal of the Riddler, because it's not. I don't feel that way. I do, however, think that it's the perfect recreation of this Riddler. It feels like that character with a late 90s spin put on it. And it's not a complete impersonation. I think Carrey does just enough for his Riddler to feel slightly distinct. While he is just as over the top as Gorshin, he isn't nearly as giddy and giggly. He's not always cracking up over his own nefarious schemes. He's far too busy trying to get the audience to crack up over his nefarious schemes. So given what I think he was going for, Carrey really fills his predecessor's shoes. Now personally, I prefer the cunning, conniving, insane, intellectual iteration who thwarts his own plans by his need to leave his signature at the scene of the crime. The genius who is the catalyst for his own downfall because he legitimately can't help but leave behind a bread trail leading back to him. The more serious variant of this character is far superior in my eyes. That is my definitive Riddler. But despite that, I believe that there's a place for this version of the character as well. It's not like there isn't a precedent for it. A lot of the Riddlers brought to the big and small screens are laughable lunatics, which is why the comparison to the Joker for this specific Riddler has always confused me. A lot of the criticism the character gets feels unjust. I mean, yeah, he's loud, he's over the top, he's obnoxious, but he's also kind of right at home in this movie. Carrey brings the energy of a Saturday morning cartoon villain to real life. And despite that, never once makes you doubt him as he chews his way through the scenery. Yes, he does seem more like a character you'd find in Lazy Town. But regardless, I think that it's attention-grabbing and it leaves an impression. Which is kind of the Riddler's whole mission statement. I mean, sure, the guy acts like a ham and cheese sandwich, but the Riddler has always been one of Batman's more quirky villains. And his performance isn't limited to the way he says a line or delivers a quip. Being that this is in fact a Jim Carrey performance, there's of course a lot of physical comedy. Jim brings a really unique strangeness to this villain, and it sort of makes him feel otherworldly. The way he walks, the way he moves around, it's all beyond bizarre. Like his walking pattern I can only describe as a peacock having a seizure while running a marathon. Like, I don't know what any of this is, but I like it and it works. At this point in the story, Edward Enigma is embracing his own absurdity, and as Frank Reynolds once said, getting real weird with it. He's a man playing by his own rules, and to be honest, he's just kind of making them up as he goes along. Jim Carrey actively steals the spotlight away from whoever he shares a scene with. The Riddler demands attention every time he shows up on screen, but really, isn't that sort of perfect for this character? The criminal who can't help his compulsion to leave behind clues, the madman who needs to be credited for his wrongdoings, the villain who yearns to be acknowledged. I mean, I think that's sort of his whole MO. His wardrobe also resembles this as well. I don't know when he got the opportunity to get all these question mark suits made or who his tailor was, but these suits definitely fit the character. They're very form-fitting, both physically and also spiritually as well. These over-the-top costumes are exactly what I'd expect to see out of a villain who is this extra. And apparently Jim Carrey assisted in making some of these costumes, which is exactly what I'd expect to hear from an actor this extra. And these suits are exactly what I'd expect to see in a movie made by a director so extra. These attires, while definitely eye-catching, are more than just flashy style over substance. They're sort of an outward inner look at the character's psyche. This outlandish style definitely complements Edward's need to be seen. Clearly, he's not going to have a problem with that when he dresses like that. All eyes will be on him without question. And Edward's need to be seen makes sense for a character who goes through his life overlooked. A complete social outsider who only becomes a focal point when he's acting up. To me, it makes sense for a character like this to turn to villainy. When the only attention you get is negative attention, you have nothing to differentiate the two. At some point, it just all becomes attention. We're shown very little of Edward's social life, and that's probably because there's very little to show. Outside of work, he doesn't have any interactions in his civilian day-to-day life. As far as we know, he has no family, no friends, not even an acquaintance. He has a couple co-workers, but that doesn't really turn out so well. Even when he eventually turns to the dark side, he doesn't really make any friends doing so. His partnership with Two-Face is brought on by both force and chance. Two-Face only tolerates the Riddler. There's no friendship to speak of between the two of them. They just work together, and it's half in protest. Despite aligning with him, Harvey never seems to warm up to him. After Riddler's defeat, he's all too happy to be over the whole over-the-top experience. Which is saying something for a guy who dresses like this. Riddler at no point is ever truly accepted by anybody. So later, when he finally feels beloved by the public, he takes his time to ham it up and bask in the moment. He even butts heads with his literal partner in crime over his time in the spotlight. But before Edward even finds that success, he's a lone reject. Alone with nothing but his own obsessions. His infatuation for Bruce Wayne drives him. Edward has absolutely nothing in life going for him. So instead of living his mundane life, he fantasizes about how great someone else's is, becoming an NPC in his own story while assigning the role of main character to Bruce. And when the center of his world shuts him down, the world around him ceases to exist. It crumbles. In his own mind's eye, he now has to step up and take Wayne's position. He now has to be the main character. Except, he doesn't really know how to do that. So instead, he has to be Bruce Wayne being the main character. Enigma has a certain comical but legitimate feeling desperation in his interactions with Bruce Wayne. He so desperately seeks his validation that when they finally meet, he can't accept not immediately getting his approval. When Bruce rejects Enigma's idea, for Edward, it feels like a rejection of self. When he's turned down by the object of his obsession, his idol becomes his rival. Something inside him snaps and sours. His strong feelings toward Bruce Wayne remain intact, but they've now grown bitter. Shunned as a peer, Riddler strove to prove that he was better. Turned down as a friend, he instead becomes his enemy. The love that he had for this public figure has now boiled into hate. His idolization has warped into jealousy. At some point, he stopped praising Bruce for all that he had and started wondering why he himself did not have it. Why couldn't he be Bruce Wayne? And in attempting to answer his own question, he became Bruce Wayne. Or at least to the best of his abilities. Instead of going on to better himself and become the best version of himself, he opts to become the worst version of Bruce Wayne, attempting to take his place in the spotlight, dressing like him, having his hair done like him. His prize invention makes him money, gives him fame. Suddenly, he's competing with the man he's attempting to be. Hell, his hero worship doesn't change upon learning the one he was worshipping is an actual hero. This doesn't dissuade him from pursuing his revenge on the Dark Knight. He allows this fascination with a man he only knows from the covers of magazines to consume his whole life and eventually his identity. His sole motivation in life is to both be Bruce Wayne and beat Bruce Wayne. And despite having a very promising start, he ultimately fails to live up to the hype. He fails on every level, because Edward could only attempt to emulate Bruce's success. He could only attempt to duplicate what he's seen in passing, only live up to the fictional version of Bruce that he created in his own mind. Edward, despite his fixation, never actually knew Bruce Wayne. And even when he learns more about him, learning his deepest, darkest secret, learning about his dual identity, he still can't comprehend it. He's the one riddle he can't solve. The one question that goes unanswered. For better or worse, this version of the character did have an effect on comic book movies following. Just think about it. How many times have you been watching a superhero movie where you saw a nerdy outsider who probably has glasses mindlessly obsess over the main character, only to inevitably become the main villain in their entry in an already established series? I mean, that's pretty specific, but off the top of my head, I can think of at least 3 or 4 names. If I'm missing out on any, let me know in the comment section below. Jim Carrey's kind of like the godfather of this reoccurring trope, and I find each new attempt of this type of character to come off as cheap, overdone nonsense that feels more like a lazy copy and paste instead of creating a character with an original, well-thought-out backstory. I loathe almost every one of them, the exception being Jim Carrey. Because Jim made this character feel legitimate. Carrey's performance as the Riddler is mostly left in for laughs. He's a fun, cynical, chaotic, campy bad guy. The man's the life of the party. How could you not like his performance? The way he just goes about his criminal activities with such glee, you almost want to root for him. But you know that you shouldn't. And to his credit, when he's not in costume, it's a completely different performance. As Edward Enigma, he genuinely comes across as disturbed and disgruntled. Even when he's not in a manic state, which isn't often, he still is unhinged and unsettling. The guy makes an impression, but it's not the ideal first impression. To say his behavior is bizarre would be an understatement. If you met someone like this in real life, you would always remember them, but it just wouldn't be for the right reasons. While he's always comical, he's also always crazy. If he's nothing else, he is at the very least entertaining in this movie, and is without a doubt the highlight of the film. Even people who don't really care for this outing, people who despise Batman Forever, are willing to admit that Jim Carrey is a redeemable quality to it. You could tell that Jim was really enjoying himself in the role, and because of that, watching him is really enjoyable. The guy played a wacky part and had fun with it, and because of that, I think a whole lot of people had fun watching him. He brings an unmatched energy to the role that I don't think could ever be truly duplicated. I think if a lot of other actors tried to play this the way that he played it, they'd probably fall short. But Jim Carrey made this character work. Outside of just Jim's performance, though, there are a lot of smaller, often overlooked elements of the character that definitely deserve to be examined. I really appreciate a lot of the silent lore that surrounds this character. You can watch Batman Forever 100 times and still miss out on little hints and fragments of his backstory happening in the background. For example, I'm sure a lot of you probably didn't know about the Guesser, the question-marked background inspiration for the Riddler. In Edward Enigma's apartment, in his workspace, we're shown a lot of this character. Very little actually identifying it, but you could just barely make out his name on a poster here or there. This puzzle-solving guy seemed to have a big impact on our boy Eddie here because he's modeled his whole villain look after him. I personally enjoy things like this because it makes the movie feel a little bit more, for lack of a better word, real. I know that's laughable in this context, but generally speaking, I enjoy that type of storytelling. The one that shows and doesn't tell. The type of storytelling that asks you to observe it. Because life doesn't always come right out and give you an explanation. You know, sometimes you gotta search for those context clues. And what I love the most about this is that nothing is really lost if you don't pick up on these things. But it does feel like a little something is added when you do. I don't know, maybe that's my own weird neurodivergence thing probably, but it's something that I wanted to point out.
I don't care!
When we're shown the Riddler's living situation, we're also shown his mental state.
Walls are closing in on all sides.
It's a tight, compact space filled only with the few that he admires. Halls of infatuation. It's cluttered, there's hardly any free space. Not at all unlike what's going on in Edward's mind. His thoughts are disarranged. He's filled with confusion and questions that come without answers. Edward Nigma's mind is an enigma even to himself. His only pathway is his blind worship of others more successful than himself. Both his personal life and mental stability are complete chaos. Disorganized destruction. The best part is all of this is communicated to the audience in passing actions and glimpses in the character's day-to-day. Now, despite me giving this role so much praise, I'm not saying it's without its faults. The character is initially shown as unhinged, but the moment where he should snap, for one reason or another, he actually calms down a bit. His insanity is the highlight of his first impression, and I'm sure that was done by design. I just wish we saw more of this manic lunatic we were first introduced to. There's still lingering remnants of that madness, but it definitely feels significantly toned down and solely played for laughs afterward. It's like jumping from a Tim Burton Batman movie into a Joel Schumacher Batman movie. There's still some of that same darkness there, but, you know, now it's under a neon light. The movie's plot states that the Riddler is becoming more intelligent every time someone uses the Enigma tech box. But when do we ever see any sign of that? He's just as intelligent with the first use of the box as he is with all of Gotham signing up for it. Him becoming more intelligent also serves no real purpose to the plot either. It's just kind of something that happens. Allegedly. It's not even like this sudden brain boost helped him deduce Batman's secret identity and solve the mother of all riddles. He only figures out who Batman is because he tricks Bruce Wayne into going into his machine so that he could read his mind. And then, when reviewing his USB drive filled with other people's personal thoughts and memories, he sees a slight image of a bat and thinks, well, that settles that. Clearly Bruce Wayne's Batman. I don't know what's worse, that jump to conclusions or the fact that it's actually founded. Anyway, I guess my point was, if you're introducing an increasing IQ, why not utilize that? Why not incorporate that? And if you're not incorporating that, why have it? The fact that they made the Riddler, who is at this rate the smartest man in the entire city, so incompetent, kind of takes away any potential threat of danger. The fact that Batman manages to defeat him with absolute ease and outsmart who is supposed to be the smartest man in the world just kind of solidifies that. So yeah, while this deserves a lot of praise, it's also not immune to criticism. Ultimately, was Jim Carrey the greatest Riddler? I don't think so. But he was, however, a pretty damn good one. And one who deserves a lot more positive recognition than he got.
That's just what I said.
And with that being said, if you like this video and would like to see a follow-up on Batman Forever's Robin, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
I hate riddles and other such nonsense.
I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.